Zach with Wingard Wearables. You're one of 12 special people who's going to watch this video to the end. In today's video, it's about the love handle. That's right, Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and we're going to be talking about the most curved, sexy, big, slicey, stabby knife you can carry inside your waistband comfortably every day. And a little context for this video. We're overhauling a lot of our YouTube studio equipment. So we've got two new lights. I got lights coming out like from the floor. We got a big microphone, a little tripod thing on the table. We put like blue tape for, I got index my toes because I do this barefoot. My big toes have to be indexed on these pieces of tape on the floor, so I'm centered. My wife's telling me you're fidgeting too much and stuff. So I just have all these things I'm looking at. I got the script on the iPad and stuff. I got things on the table. I'm looking at the tape. So it's just going to be terrible to watch, but we're going to slog through it because you're one of those 12 special people and you love to hear about the love handle. Now, the Love Handle is a collaboration between Wingard Wearables and Tate Buzzard of the Norman Tactical. Now, Wingard Wearables, we strive to come out with distinctive designs. We've been around since 2008 doing all kinds of unique concealed carry tomahawks and spike tools. And so we've been thinking about, hey, what would be Wingard Wearables' take on a knife, like our first knife? We haven't made a knife since we launched in 2018. So, what would we bring to the table that would be distinctive and provide some new capability in the knife world? And we decided to go with this. And we're going to tell you how that came about. So we wanted to provide a unique capability to our customers. And when we were looking at knives on the market, especially when it came to like fixed blade knives, everyday carry fixed blade knives, when you look at what's out there, they're usually between 6 inches to 8 inches in overall length. They don't really go above 8 inches. And that's because the human body is very curved. And when you take a straight object that's rigid and unbendable, unflexible, you can, depending on where you carry it along your waistline, you can only go so many inches in length until it starts to protrude a lot and print a lot and jam into things and catch on things. So when you look at the side hip area, I got a back ripper tomahawk right here, you can't really go even 5 inches in straight rigid length before you have a projection that will jam up against a seat that you're sitting in all day and that sort of thing. And that's why with our back ripper tomahawks and empress tomahawks, the rear spikes are curved to conform to your body. Now, when you're looking at the front of the body, you can get about 8 inches in maximum length, straight rigid length along the waistline. And anything beyond 8 inches begins to project. So when you look at our dick pick multi-tool, full-size dick pick, or our Stingray tomahawk, the spike tip to the chopping edge length, those are straight rigid objects that max out at about 8 inches. And so you can carry them, appendix carry, inside the waistband. But anything beyond 8 inches, you can't. And that's why most EDC fixed blades max out at 8 inches. That's the maximum practical size that can fit around the body or inside a pocket. So we wanted to go beyond that. In order to go beyond that in length, you got to be curved, right? So what I did is I started by taking, it didn't start with this design. It started with cardboard cutouts of different sizes and getting the curve right, matching the pieces of stiff cardboard up against my body. I determined that you could go from 9 to say 13 inches of overall length, and if it was very curved, it could conform to the contour of the body. So we wanted to start somewhere on this design. This isn't about coming out with a perfect first knife. This is coming out with a good first knife. So we said, hey, let's not try to optimize. Let's just pick and define the design so we can sprint down and make a good knife. So, for the maximum overall length, we're looking at that 9 to 13 inches range. We just arbitrarily decided, hey, let's shoot for around 11 inches overall length as a starting point. So one of the other decisions we had to make was which side of the knife is going to be edged. Are we going to do a double-edged knife? Are we going to do like a bayonet grind knife? Are we going to have the inside edge here sharpened or the outside edge. And for a safety consideration, this is the first time we've designed a knife. We decided to go with an edge that was on the outside so that when you draw it from the carry system, right, the edge is away from you, right? If we started with our design putting an edge on this side, whether it was a bayonet grind or the whole thing, double-edged or single-edged, all this sharpened, we would really have to do even more design on the carry system to make sure that when it was drawn that there was no risk of that edge raking and skimming over the body. And so that's why the design became a trailing point knife, right? So we got the neutral axis of the knife, the point trails behind, and it's curved on this edge, right? So that's how that came about. Now, I am a fan of all knives, and in the future we may be able to explore designs in this curved shape that are edged on this portion. But for now, to simplify the carry system, trailing point was the way to go. I also find from carrying all kinds of blades that if you have a knife edge that is curved on the inside, like I carry a Copus Designs Elvia, and it's a very light, handy knife, and it excels at piercing and propagating cuts. But it struggles in other common cutting tasks, especially if you're talking cutting, say, meat on a flat surface or meat off of a bone. You really wind up just raking and ripping through the tissue fibers with just the tip of this talon blade. And I'm a big fan of curved, sharpened talon blades. That's why we have them on our back ripper tomahawks. But I do think a straight spine, big bellied knife, something like this, or a trailing point knife, they tend to do better at slicing and cutting materials that are on flat surfaces. That's why vast majority of kitchen knives have a belly to them, and that's why trailing point knives excel in a lot of like butchering type tasks. Now, there are like infinite examples of straight spine knives with bellies, right? But the trailing point knife is one that you don't see as much in the everyday carry community. There are lots of examples of trailing point knives in history. Butcher knives, designed to take meat off the bone. There's a specific type of field knife from the Philippines. It was very common for all kinds of daily field tasks. You've got skinning knives that are made for caping, and also, you want to avoid spilling, that the tip of the knife, accidentally piercing the hide or spilling out, biological fluids that spoil the meat, that sort of thing. So the trailing point knives really excel at that. Probably the biggest trailing point knives of all time, for whaling, the flintsing knives, they were processing, literally tons of blubber. And I think when it comes to the design of the trailing point knife, one of its strengths is as you're using it in the cutting motion, whether you're slicing this way, cutting, that sort of thing, you have a natural draw cut motion, so you're pulling more of the edge through the cut, and that's more energy efficient, especially if during the processing of animals and hitting bone and that sort of thing, if the knife edge begins to dull anywhere on its length, that inherent energy efficiency of the drawing cut is very good at splitting through tissues, fibrous materials and that sort of thing. So that's one of the strengths of the trailing point knife design, is just the inherent draw cutting action. And it does rocking cuts very well. Like if you're doing a rocking cut through like a pizza or cutting up vegetables, like ulu knives and pizza knives are very, very curved for that reason. So we've got an overall shape of the design and an overall size. What exactly is the knife going to look like, right? I drew inspiration from a political cartoon from the 1812 war. It was a very unwoke time, but it was a depiction of these Native American warriors who had scalped these American patriots and were selling the scalps to the British, because that was widely rumored from the Revolutionary War days, and again for war propaganda purposes in the War of 1812, that the British were buying American scalps. And I'm not going to get into any of like history, scalping practice, that sort of thing, but in this cartoon depiction, the scalping knife that the Native American warrior is holding is extremely curved. And if you look at the literature, the accounts of scalping knives, they were often described as very curved, but none of them, if you look at like museum collections and examples in other people's like personal like antique collections, none of them are curved like that. They all had curved bellied blades, but they had straight spines. But still, even though this wasn't an accurate depiction of a scalping knife, I looked at that and I thought, gosh, that looks wicked. What if Wingard Wearables like took inspiration from the scalping knife and came up with their own? What would that look like? And that's eventually, after many, many sketches, what led to this look of the design. So based on that inspiration, I did lots and lots and lots of hand sketches and eventually came up with a design that looked like this. So it's about 11.5 inches long. There's a 7.5 inch long blade, and the handle is Coke bottle shaped, right? It goes rounded, curves in, flares out, okay? And it has grooves hand filed in it for texture, right? So that's quite a bit of blade for this knife length. If you look at like a K-bar knife, which is 12 inches overall, that's got a 7-inch blade, right? And same with Sykes Fairbairn dagger, 12 inches long overall, 7-inch blade. This, depending on how you grip it in your hand, can have almost 8 inches of length from the hand to around 7.5. So it's got quite a bit of blade to handle ratio. Now, the handle does look short, and it is relatively short. But when you look at historic daggers, like if you go to like some French war museum and see, historic daggers, or like you look at a Jimbaya dagger, that sort of thing, Middle Eastern daggers, many knives had short handles because that locked your hand into certain strong gripping positions that were very good in forceful blows. Now, we went with a shorter handle for a couple of reasons. First, the handle bottoms out in your grip, right? So when you grip it forcefully, the butt of the handle bottoms out here. It's fully supported in the hand or thumb capped, right? So that can result in a more secure hand handle connection. Also, a longer handle would protrude out from the base of your hand like this, right? And so that would definitely require some form of guard or choil to prevent your hand from sliding up, because once the handle is protruding out, if you are subjecting a big force to this, it's more likely to break your grip than if you're fully supporting the handle in your hand. I hope that makes sense. Also, the handle is shorter because it results in an overall shorter package. It doesn't protrude out as much above the body. It's more streamlined. And finally, a shorter handle and the overall length maximizes how much edge you can have. So those are the reasons why we went with such a short handle. It's very rounded in the corners, right? It's very comfortable up against the body or gripped forcefully in your hand. You also notice regarding hand protection, there's no finger choil like you'd see on like the street buoy a lot, Fred Perrin type knives. And I'm a fan of finger choils, but for this design, the blade cross section is constant. If we went with a finger choil here, that would reduce the cross-sectional area. That would create a stress riser right here in the knife, and we wanted to avoid that for our first knife. Future knife designs, we might do a finger choil, but not on this one. We wanted to maximize strength. Also, there is no guard. Now, when I was a youth in Alabama, I wanted to carry these, and I did carry them. K-bar knife, Sykes Fairbairn knife. And they have guards that project about a 1/2 inch out from the handle, both of these. And let me tell you, they were very uncomfortable. The guards themselves would jam up against your body. When you drew them, they would sometimes catch on clothing. And when you would resheath them, they would often catch clothing and hinder and foul up your resheathing process when it got caught in between here. So I found guards to be pretty inconvenient. And when you're carrying the knife up here against your body, if you had metal guards projecting outward, that's going to be jamming into your tinder bits big time. You don't want that. So we did not use a guard. And we had a love handle video recently go viral, and that invited a number of YouTube internet warrior commenters that were telling us there's no way you can have that knife without a guard. Your hand's just going to slide up the blade. You're going to fillet your fingers. Now, they did not bother to watch our earlier video about knife grip slip testing. All right. We had a YouTube short where we showed, and we're going to do a picture-in-picture over here, testing this love handle in different gripping conditions in a very rigorous, forceful thrust. Now, a disclaimer, the grip slip test, that's a term we came up with. This is inherently dangerous. Do not do this at home. Don't assume my results are your results. I have grip strength of whatever it is. It's not the same as yours. You know, my skin friction is going to be different from yours. The force I exert in the stab could be different from yours, so your results may vary. Don't try it, okay? But what we wanted to do was realistically represent the thrust, forceful thrust, against a mobile object. So we had this tree trunk. Tate Buzzard made us a love handle that did not have an edge, right? So it was ground without an edge, so it matched almost the same weight. We decided to make worst case scenario, not file any grooves in this. So this was sanded smooth black paper micarta for the handle. So it matched the same weight, had the same texture, actually had slicker texture than the actual knife. And what we did is, I didn't want to use those like stab-proof gloves because that ruins like the skin to handle friction. That kind of defeats the purpose of the test. And we didn't want to clamp on a guard because we wanted to observe if the hand might slip up onto the edge. So that edgeless knife was like the safest way to go, even though this is still a dangerous test. So we tested thrust grip, ice pick grip, and then sort of a hammer fist grip, stabbing into a tree trunk with dry hands, with wet hands where I threw water on my hands, and then oiled hands. It was like a mixture of oils, mostly mineral oil, coating my hand. And of course, that was worst case scenario. You've got, oily grip, slippery as snot, and when you fully support the handle in your hand because of that short handle and that Coke bottle grip with the flare-outs, I was able to show that your hand did not slide up onto the edge, in these forceful stabs. And again, results may vary. All right, so the knives must have guards crowd. They didn't bother watching our video where we showed under the worst case scenario that my hand did not slide up onto the edge even when it was oiled and forcefully stabbing into a tree, right? So, they're probably not going to be convinced, right, because they didn't see the video. But historically, many knives don't have guards. So if you look at the knives today, knives like folding knives almost never have guards, including the versions they give to children, like a Boy Scout knife. Kitchen knives do not have guards. Some kitchen knives have little nubbins projecting out in line with the edge, but our design also, the love handle, has flare-out nubbins, that Coke bottle shaped grip, just on the sides of the handle. And fillet knives, speaking of slippery conditions, like cleaning a fish is always slippery and sticky and wet and that sort of thing. So fillet knives also do not have guards. And, folks might point out that none of those were made for fighting, right? Surely a fighting knife like a K-bar or a Sykes Fairbairn, those had guards, and every fighting knife should have a guard, right? Well, historically, we'll give you a few examples of fighting knives that did not. So I'm just going to read from a list here, okay? So these are knives that were designed to stab people, right? or intended to be used in that way. Viking sex, many bowie knives from their peak period of use did not have guards. Many tanto knives, including the, I'm going to mispronounce this, Yorirodoshi, which was used by the samurai class for stabbing and armor and that sort of thing. They didn't have guards. The bullock daggers, now you might call those swells close to the edge a guard, but I don't consider that a guard. And again, our design has swells near the blade, it's just to the sides, right? We also have the Irish boot dagger, Singdu. I'm not going to pronounce that one right. Alabama Public Education, you guys forgive me. And butterfly knives, the Jimbaya knife, the Klinkit double-sided daggers, ear daggers, karambits, ring daggers. Yes, a ring hinders grip slip. There are other approaches to prevent grip slip than a metal guard, right? Lapel knives, thumb daggers, those used lanyards to assist in preventing your hand from sliding up onto the blade. Kakuris, which sometimes were used to stab people, they have a ring that projects a raised ridge in the handle. Also no guard, right? And you have many modern knives like Pakal-style knives and modern military daggers, Winkler, Williams blade design. Those are relying on thumb capping to prevent sliding your hand down onto the edge, right? Just about every tactical folder ever made doesn't have a guard. Prison shivs, which are made to stab people, do not have guards. So these examples, just a few examples, right, do not have guards, and yet the people making them were thinking, this is going to be used potentially to stab somebody, and yet no guards. I guess they were just idiots, right? Anyway, bottom line, there are many ways to achieve hand protection, preventing your hand from sliding up to the edge that do not involve metal guards. I'm not a hater on metal guards. I'm more of a hater on the type of thinking that says that it must have a guard, right? You have many other design choices than a metal guard. You have finger choils, you have grip swells, grip texture, grip sizing, and lanyards. All those design choices can come together to reduce the probability of your hand sliding up onto the edge. And finally, if you insist that a knife has to have a guard, let's just take your thought process to the logical conclusion, right? Why is only one little plate of metal enough to protect your hand, right? Why not multiple plates? Why not have a knuckle duster knife and that's it? You can't get any better hand protection than that. And yet, it's inconvenient to carry. And oftentimes, so is this, all right? So, speaking of this knife, World War II, K-bar. My granddaddy John served in World War II, and he was taught knife combatives. And he told me that the style of combatives they were taught was point forward, edge up, heave ho into the target, and then an upward rip. Now, when people look at the love handle, often they think, gosh, this thing is just a slicey whirlwind of slashy goodness. And it definitely, in the draw cut, can slice and cut and slash quite well. But it also works very well in this point forward, edge up orientation. And that style of knife fighting, I tried to do sort of a review, like historically, what's the history behind that? And I could not find much, but here's what I could find. I'm not sure how credible all this information is. It seems like the earliest accounts of that point forward, edge up grip orientation were with Jim Bowie in sort of the early era of Bowie knives. So you're talking like 1820s to 1830s. There is even an example of an early Bowie knife that was designed with almost a bit grip to be more optimized in that sort of fighting technique. And you look at like 19th century newspaper accounts that talk about Central America and Mexico and Texas and that sort of thing, the Central America through American Southwest and into the American South, that sort of knife fighting style being popular. And you have, what I've heard from my grandfather in World War II. We also have an example of like a knuckle duster trench fighting knife from the United Kingdom where the edge is oriented that way for the thrust and then a rip. And there are even accounts like from Finland, in combatives in World War II using that orientation as if it was a technique that had been in use for a long time before they used it in the war. And there are Russian designs of knives for fighting that use that. So you have this knife fighting style, point forward, edge up, and it's used across, from the 1820s through World War II. I've even talked to Cold War vets that were trained in using it. So you're talking, easily 150 years or more that this technique was taught across all kinds of cultural and climate conditions, different clothing people were wearing from like Central America to like Russia. That's huge, huge differences. And yet the technique was very similar or the same. So that's fascinating to me. I find that very interesting. And yet you don't see any real like knife fighting books or anything that really talk about it much. So it's just an interesting type of history. I'd love to learn more. If you know more about it, comment below. But I tend to pay attention to things where like a technique or a blade style or a approach on using a weapon is used across context. Well, that is pretty interesting to me. It's not something that was like only developed in like a specific culture, a specific climate and area. It has broader application. And the love handle really is oriented well that way. You got the point forward, edge up, thrust, and rip. Another interesting feature, it is so curved that by simply turning it in your hand and kind of shifting your wrist, you wind up shifting the point about 18 inches in length and completely changing the orientation from a further range thrust, like higher standoff engagement, to a really close range grappling engagement. So that's a very unique feature of having such a curved design, not just from ergonomic carry, but for combatives. Now, that's enough about combatives. Let's talk about practical bushcraft applications, that sort of thing. The spine, which is 3/16 thick, comes to a hard edge. It's not a sharp edge, like you can rest your thumb on it. But you can use that for scraping. So in this position here with your thumb pad here, you can use that for scraping bark or like making feather sticks or striking a ferro rod. And you can also do a choked up pinch grip for finer type cuts, or lay your finger on it for cutting very gentle type draw cuts, slicing cuts on a tabletop. And the carry system. It is a taco style sheath. It's got multiple eyelets, brass eyelets along it. And it comes with Chicago style screws, discrete carry concept clips, 2 of them, and Ranger bands, which the only purpose these Ranger bands serve is to keep the orientation of the clips in this orientation so they don't like fold or rotate in some unhelpful direction. And so you clip that here above your waistline, or you can move these or even remove some of these and wear it inside the waistband like this, and draw it in reverse grip. So if you're a real thin person and this is not as comfortable for you, you can certainly wear it like that. We've had folks try that out and really like it. I've explored different grip options as well. Like I've removed the carry system's hardware entirely here and had it looped through paracord and dangled on a loop between my shoulders, just dangling down under a covering garment. And it does work, right? And you can draw it. I've also had the clips oriented this way so I could clip it here. This is called a CMFTW, named after Matt Freeman, the style of carry he liked to do, where the handle was pointed down, the blade was openly carried, trapped in a belt, and you would draw it in reverse grip. Now those work. I'll say they work theoretically. I am not a fan of carrying your fixed blade with the handle pointed down. I think you're just inviting trouble with gravity. Now compared to a K-bar knife, occasionally you'll see pictures or depictions of soldiers in Vietnam carrying their K-bar knife like this. That is just crazy to me. People did do it. But if you had any failure in your carry system looseness, if you did not get the carry system snapped together well, the knife would just fall out. For this design, the love handle, it's got a lot more resistance to just falling out because of the curvature of the sheath. But still, I mean, you have to get that locked in right every single time. And I mean, these knives are freehand ground. The sheaths are handmade, hand pressed. They are firm, they are secure, but eventually you may come into a situation where you get so rattled or subjected to so many G's that carrying it upside down results in a blade coming loose. Think like you get in a motorcycle accident or something like that. But yeah, it's a taco style sheath. It's very adaptable for different carry orientations. There's no real rattle to it. This is Spyderco's Fred Perrin Street Bowie. I love Fred Perrin and his knives, but the sheath Spyderco made, very rattly. I mean, it's like maracas. So, these are hand pressed, very firm. So definitely investigate which method of carry is most comfortable for you. But for me, it's definitely this. I can wear lounge clothes comfortably, dress pants, that sort of thing, worn, under my underbelly, right? Now, let's see. One of the things we wanted to do, right, that didn't happen, one of the benefits of having such a big knife is we wanted to have a sort of handle applique. Draw knife applique is what we were going to call it, where it would be an attachment to your taco style sheath, and you take it out and put it over the tip of your blade, and you could use the length of the love handle so that you had a working edge for draw knife action, or a really hard corners for focus scraping action. So you could use that like a draw knife. And I just wasn't happy with how that was being deployed. Like, it added a lot of bulk to your sheath. I wasn't satisfied with this specific design. It felt like that there could be some safety issues that we needed to address that would require essentially big choils or guards or grip swells, that sort of thing. The kind of thought process you go into for the handle to make it safe would then have to be applied to this tip cover, and all of a sudden it would start getting large. So we did not launch the love handle with a draw knife applique. We're still thinking about it. Let us know, comment below if you think that's like a feature you'd really like to see. If we do successfully develop it, we may offer it as like an aftermarket thing to go with your love handle. But yeah, let's talk about how it's made. So the material, the blade material is 3/16 80 CRV2. We get it from New Jersey Steel Baron in New Jersey. It gets water jet cut in Ronks, PA. I ship these and the black paper micarta to Tate Buzzard in Tucson, Arizona. Now, Tate Buzzard got on my radar. He's been making knives for several years, and he makes these really eye-catching knives that are sort of like ethnographic, like foreign swords scaled down to knives. So this is like a cutlass Bowie knife, and this is an Egyptian Khopesh knife concept. And they are just like, you see these things, they're so wild. I mean, that, I was like, man, this guy, his mind is where I'm at, So, I reached out to him in 2021 to see if he'd be interested in collaborating on this project. And, we've been working at it. And so he freehand grinds these knives and makes the sheath. I do, some file work here on the grips. But it's been a great collaboration. And the black paper micarta, I think someone said it looked like buffalo horn. It does look like that because we've got 2 1/4-inch black paper micarta pins that go in there as well. We really wanted to go with that sort of frontier vibe, like a scalping knife. And yeah, I mean, they've got a flat grind on the edge, and they've been great. This whole knife is about in the sheath. It's under a foot long and it weighs around 11 ounces. So that's significantly smaller than a K-bar knife, which is pushing 13 inches and weighs over 14 ounces and is just uncomfortable to carry. So if you're looking for a big knife you can wear on your body every day comfortably, we've got you covered. Unfortunately, we only have small batches of these. These are entirely American made. You're supporting several small businesses when you purchase one. We have a small batch on the site that just dropped, so definitely try to get one. We hope to have a couple of dozen more made in the spring, and then after that we got to think through like, hey, what do we do with this next? If there is a market demand for a big knife that you can comfortably EDC, what do we do else? What do we change materials? Go to like AEBL or something like that for the steel. Different handle materials, modified sheath design. So we don't know what the future is exactly for the Love Handle, but we hope it sticks around and we hope you get one. So we see the Love Handle as our first go at a curved knife that's big that you can everyday carry. And we're thinking of broadening that concept to other distinctive battle-proven blades. So you can think of this as like a single edge camping or scalping knife that's big, it's long, and you can carry it on you. Well, what happens if we apply that curved, contoured package to, say, a Bowie knife or a Tanto or a Chris knife or a hollow-handled Rambo survival knife? All these distinctive knife designs that are out there that are big fixed blades. What happens if we can contour them to conform and conceal carry to your body? Like, what's that look like? So we're really excited about the future. Just tackling all these different designs. The design space just seems to be infinite. I want to thank you for being one of the 12 special people who watched this video to the end. Share it so 13 will have watched it, and have a great Valentine's Day. Enjoy it with love, with a Love Handle. Be edgy!